Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello, welcome to another episode of The View, or The VU, as QuianaDenae Perkins, one of our co-hosts, likes to call us. I'm Aisha Hauser. My pronouns are she, her, and I am in the land of the Coast Salish people, the Duwamish, also known as Seattle, Washington. And it is cold. It thinks it's winter here in Seattle, so what are you going to do? And yet we have amazing tulips that are blooming everywhere, and you can get them here for it feels like 50 cents. So a bright spot in what seems to be a rapidly deteriorating world. And so today is a host episode. I'm very excited. We will take the conversation wherever the spirit moves us. So this should be pretty cool. And we have today DC and Janine. Woohoo! And of course, Tanner, our esteemed producer, is behind it used to be behind the chalice. So right now, Tanner is, I'm just going to keep saying behind the chalice. DC, welcome.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. Mother Nature, I think, is drunk, or at the very least, her weather is, because it was 70 on Tuesday, and then yesterday it snowed, and today it's 60. I have crocuses in my yard, like other things that I don't know the names of are starting to come up. The lilacs are starting to bud out. It's February. Like, what the hell? Like, I don't know. But I'm coming to you from central Pennsylvania, the land of the Susquehanna, and I am on the confluence of the north and west branches of the mighty Susquehanna River. And things are pretty decent. How are things out there in the desert, Janine?
Well, they are quite deserty. It's actually very cold today, but beautiful blue skies, and it'll warm up because it's Phoenix and the winter is nice here.
We're gonna Brady, what DC refers to as the Brady Bunch view. So y'all get to see all of us in our expressions. I mean, we could start anywhere. I guess what's on my mind is what happened in I keep wanting to say East Palestine, Ohio, even though it is spelled Palestine. They pronounce it Palestine. And the derailment that is, and the toxic chemicals that are causing birds to fall from the sky. And that's one of many horrific things that are literally happening this second. Russia pulled out of the nuclear treaty. Cool.
Right.
So in addition to this, it doesn't feel slow moving anymore, the apocalypse. So yeah, I don't know where to start. And then there's the Article 2 Commission that there are some folks who seem to be upset about. And I want to go, really? Anyway, so where do you all want to start? I'm just the first. Which existential things do we want to address?
You know, it's interesting. I was talking with one of my board members this morning, having a meeting about some like website stuff. But one of the things we were talking about was it feels like with the pandemic, it was like we didn't have any stability. Like everything, like our legs were taken out from under us, right? We didn't know what was going on. We didn't quite know how to, like, we couldn't find balance. We couldn't find level. We couldn't figure out which way was up. And now that we're starting to get away from that, we've been at sea so long that we don't know how to stand up on firm ground.
Yeah.
Right? We've been conditioned to operate with our vagal systems like whacked out on adrenaline all the damn time.
Oof.
So that's a thing. And the train wreck, the train with the chemical spill, where I am here in central Pennsylvania, there's a proposal to put a really scary chemical recycling plant, but it's not like, you chop up Mountain Dew bottles and make, park benches. It's like melt a bunch of plastic into a variety of gaseous and liquid chemical compounds, which will then be shipped by rail, no problem there, to other plastic companies to be made into other kinds of plastics. Yeah, and they're doing this they're proposing to put this thing on the banks of the North Branch of the Susquehanna River, which is part of the Chesapeake watershed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like the primary river that feeds into the Chesapeake Bay. With all of the fisheries there, and the one of the largest oyster fisheries in North America is in that bay, and the crabs, because the oysters need brackish water, and they need a flow of salt and fresh, and like, and they put it just across the line from the town that's kind of got a better tax base and a more educated populace into the town that doesn't. Yeah, it reminds me of, and I'm going to date myself here, the Seabrook nuclear power plant, when that went in. Hi, Aisha's puppy. And what happened was they picked a town, for lack of a better term, that nobody cared about. It was kind of a blight on the map. It was what it mattered. What it was is nobody with any money cared to defend this town, right? Nobody with any power, any authority, that kind of stuff. So in New Hampshire, it wasn't people of color necessarily, but it was the people who were living with generational poverty, and lack of education and lack of access to resources, and they got the nuke plant because the people just down the coast in Newburyport, Massachusetts, were certainly not going to have such a thing in their town, And the people north in like Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or Hampton, New Hampshire, were certainly not going to have such a thing in their town. But Seabrook was, so yeah, it all feels very, very similar here with the chemical things and
well,
stuff.
This is where, when I just did a workshop yesterday on the roots of anti-Black racism and anti-Black racism, and the thing that I tried to press upon the folks who attended, this was for a community college, that I think it's still lost on too many white people, is rising. What is it? Rising tide raises all boats. Like, when we fight systems of oppression and dismantle the roots of violent extractive capitalism, this shit won't go on. It's going on because there have been, I don't even need to go, but this is the ramifications of that. Now, New Hampshire, I lived in New Hampshire, in Rye, actually.
Yeah.
Between
the plant.
I know exactly. And so, the impact of violent extractive capitalism affects everyone, whether or not you are Black. But it has, because anyway, there's a fallacy, as you well know, from many white people that think this is anti-Blackness is only a problem for Black people and not our whole fucking society. So anyhow,
no,
it's Janine.
And I think this is also, like, to bring it back to our congregations, this is why we talk about environmental justice instead of just climate change. Because too often our social justice teams and congregations get really siloed on their one issue, right? Like, we don't deal with anti-racism because we are the climate team. But it's all connected, right? When you have one thread on the corner of this quilt and you keep tugging at your thread, like, it all has to be connected to the main thing. And so this is an example of environmental racism, right? When in
absolutely,
we know that a really important project for us to work on was with Chispa, when they were working on healthy buses for healthy niños. And it was about getting like clean school buses in South Phoenix, because it was the worst polluted air in the entire area. And guess who lives there, right? Black and brown folks,
of course,
folks, poor folks, because that's where the air is most polluted. And so if we ignore the links between all oppressions and we just work on our one thing, then sometimes we end up coming up with solutions that actually harm people. I know there's a lot of, especially in UU congregations, there's a lot of debate over some of the proposed legislation. There's some proposals out there that talk about like raising gas taxes to deal with climate change instead of, regulations for corporations, and especially oil companies that are 60% of the cause of all, what's going on with the earth. And raising gas taxes affects then working class people most, and because of structural racism it's going to affect Black and brown people most. So when we think about these things in our congregations, it's so important to understand the linkage, and it's hard for me to really trust a climate justice team that isn't willing to do anti-racism learning or economic justice learning, because it's all so interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is such a good point. That happened in Washington State, the gas tax proposal. And there were many groups of color that said, this is horseshit. This is already, Washington State has one of the most regressive tax systems already. And then on top of it, add gas tax. And actually, I was just thinking, I'm like, geez, I don't even know if it was years and years ago. I don't know if it passed or not. I will look that up just for my own FYI. I mean, like everywhere else, gas is ridiculously expensive, but I'm actually not sure that proposal passed the way it was written. But to your point, there's a single-mindedness which is in UU congregations among older white climate justice folks, which, yes, we all need to, and again, it is not a singular thing. It is absolutely climate justice. And
right. And you're not going to fix it with your Prius.
Yeah, I mean, you bring that up, and I think that's a hard, when we talk about climate climate justice, it's really a hard shift sometimes for people to go from individualist solutions to collective solutions. And so it's not a bad thing to drive a Prius or to be vegan.
Right.
Or use your personal purchasing power on green products or put solar panels on your house. All those things are great, but they're also not going to be the solution, because individualist solutions are never going to be a solution for collective problem. So then how do we also harness our collective power as the people to actually attack what will make a big difference, which is fighting the oil companies and ultimately having solutions to prevent them from doing what they're doing. And so I think when we think about who we partner with, it's really important to consider partnering with groups that are Indigenous-led, youth-led, people who are directly impacted the most by climate racism, climate injustice, people who will inherit the planet that we live on way after us. And when you look at what groups like Sunrise Movement or the folks fighting Line 3 in Minnesota are doing, they're not about encouraging people to, drive a Prius and be vegan. They're talking about how can we fight the pipelines.
Here's a question that I've actually been asking myself, because I do as much work in secular spaces as I do in UU spaces. In this country, I think, because we don't have a shared reality, this country collectively, and I mean the royal we, of the roots of the problem, right? So there are, I mean, letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was very clear. The white nationalists know what they're about. White people are better, screw everybody else. But white moderates have this kind of threading the needle of, well, and there's still some of that, a lot of that right now that exists, especially in UU congregations, this middle of the road stuff. So how do we, I guess I'm trying to encapsulate my question. How do we get to inspiring building coalition building that recognizes that that there is a we, and I don't mean it all in a, somebody actually called me Pollyanna recently. I'm like, that is the last thing anybody has ever called me. What now? I was like, well, that's something that never came my way, but okay. So I guess it's kind of an existential thing, because humanity, and this has been written about for decades, but like we need to get our act together as a collective. And I don't know where are the ends to for humans to see ourselves as a collective. And I don't know. I mean, maybe this is an unanswerable question, but I don't know. Am I frozen or did Janice freeze?
I think Janine froze.
Okay.
One of the things that, and I'll just fill in. Oh, Janine's back with us. You froze, honey.
I froze for a minute. I'll take the Pollyanna answer, and that our theology as UUs tell us that we're all interconnected, right? And so if we can really lean into interdependence and what that really means and what it looks like when we're interdependent, and we understand that what I do affects you, and we're all in this together, it's going to take all of us journeying towards the beloved community, a world where everyone is in right relationship. Then we're all in it together. The other people aren't going away, right? We can't say like, oh, well, I like my beloved community, but not your beloved community. That's not a thing, right? The beloved community is just one thing. You can't call your own individual church the beloved community. That's not it. The beloved community is the whole world in right relationship. So when we understand how interdependent we are and how our actions affect others and how others' actions affect us and how it really takes all of us, I think that's a piece of our theology that we can't underestimate, because if we apply that to our actions around climate justice, then it has a theological mandate. It has a grounding for that.
So then my next question is, because I struggle with this, like there are, like the governor of Florida who, is waking up every day wanting to be worse than the hate pumpkin. That's a life goal of his. It's hard. Yes, theologically, that man is part of our beloved community. And the part of me that's like from fucking Jersey and wants to just take him out is like, fuck you for attacking children. And like, you know, wanting to erase the history of Black people, like, it's so much. I mean, at the very, I mean, tip of the iceberg, right? And so that's, and folks who actively want to bring destruction, put profit against people, because you're not wrong in terms of we're all in different boats. We may be all in this together in terms of we're all on the same planet, but that's where the similarities end, right? So I've struggled with, you know, how to, because here's what I'll say. I don't want to become what I hate. And I try not to hate. I try not to have hate in my heart, not in a Pollyanna way, but I don't want that energy. It's like, this sucks. You suck. You're clearly behaving in a terrible, evil manner. And I kind of just cut it out in my head. You know what I mean? So I guess that's been something I've been like, I want to be clear about my boundaries, clear about who I center, clear about fighting systems of oppression and dismantling them. And then yeah, am I making sense? I guess yeah. I guess there's a kind of a larger existential question.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
I think.
Oh, go ahead, DC.
Go ahead.
I think my answer to that is kind of like similar to my abolitionist soapbox, but I think the answer is we build a world where Trump can't exist or DeSantis can't exist, right? Because what kind of world created Trump, right? A world of ridiculous inequity,
shit, that's a question.
Right? Where he grew up with a silver spoon in a family where he was never held accountable for anything, right? No one says no to him. And so how was he allowed to exist in this world? And how do we build a world where he couldn't exist? Because that would never be the situation. And it would never be a world that could create someone like Trump who would then ascend to power. And so I think when you say Aisha, your role in life is not to sit down and have tea with Trump and try to see him as a human, right? I mean, that is clear. That is not what you are called to do. No one needs to be asking you to do that. But you do have a piece, we all have a piece in building a world, right? So maybe your piece of it is, you know, building up Black and brown power in Unitarian Universalism and helping people understand their own power, or building coalitions, or helping people dismantle some of the systems that were in place to let Trump be the way he is as a person and then ascend to power.
Thanks for taking us to church, Janine. That is probably one of the best answer I've heard in terms of where my dilemma is. DC, thank you for that. Like, truly, that was really helpful for me.
One of the things that, you know, it's fascinating, the way people listen to me now, like they didn't before. I preached this past weekend in a neighboring church. We did a pulpit swap with a colleague, and I preached on Article 2. And when I said, we who have privilege have a moral obligation to dismantle the system that sets barriers in front of others that it doesn't set in front of us. It's horrible, but there were people there who listened to me specifically because they read me as a white guy. And there's a part of me that's like, wow, I have this power, I can do this stuff. And then there's this other part of me that wants to just throw up. You know?
But that's also called leveraging where people listen to you, leveraging the privilege that you have.
Oh my God. The stuff that I have learned. The bar for acceptable behavior for white guys is so low. So low. I go through life just being a normal, decent human being, and people look at me like I'm the freaking tooth fairy. Like, I'm just like, what the hell? Like, guys get away with so much shit.
Yep.
I'm like,
But that's so much power. Like, I'm just like, you could use that. Like, I can imagine.
Well, I do when I try. I do when I try, but it like pisses me off so much.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
saying things. I mean, I've
told that.
Well, so I've told a story before. Our friend Chris Crass, who's a UU anti-racist organizer and a white guy, right? We were in a workshop in GA. He came and did the keynote for the CUSAN conference, so Coalition of UU State Action Networks. And he was up there yelling like he does about white supremacy, right? And people were like on their feet, they loved it. And then we all sat down and broke into small groups, and we're talking about how the keynote applied to our own state action networks. And I said something about white supremacy culture, and immediately had like 3 white men yelling at me for saying white supremacy culture. And I was like, he just said it. He just yelled about it 5 minutes ago, and you clapped, and I'm not allowed to say it, right? And I'm white. I'm a woman who in UU circles sometimes is read as a young woman, even though I'm 40. So it'll be interesting to see how old I have to be before I'm taken seriously. Someone told me once that there's no age for women where they're taken seriously. You just go directly from a silly young woman who doesn't know anything to like a crazy old lady who doesn't know anything.
Oh, that's charming. Thank you, patriarchy.
Right. There's about a decade in which you're that angry bitch.
I feel like I may be in that one.
Proudly.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So just yeah. It's weird. It's really weird. Like the first time I really noticed it, I went to an auction. I buy stuff at auction because I'm cheap as hell, right? And plus I like shiny things. So I went and I picked up some depression glass for a colleague who collects such weird stuff. And, the thing said, don't forget to bring your own packing materials, blah, 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 blah. Right. So, okay. So I showed up with, some canvas bags and a couple editions of the Sunday paper. And the people there were like, oh my God, he brought his own stuff. Like, but that's what it said to do. Like, I'm not going to show up and expect to bring home a bushel of glass, like rolled up in my shirt. Like, what? Like, they're like, oh no, a lot of guys just don't. They just forget and they show up and they hope we have something.
Wow.
And I'm like, men, you are fucking up so bad. Like, this is what they expect. And I show up and just behaving like a moderately coherent, not asshole person, and they want to throw me a parade.
That's literally the bar, DC. Be a not asshole person for men. That's literally the bar.
It's nuts. It's bullshit. It's
agreed.
The one thing that, it's weird. There's some stuff that I don't like. I can't smile at children in the store anymore. Then I'm viewed as this creepy old guy making faces at my kid. When I was presenting as a woman and I was in the hardware store, I could help other women and empower them. And now they view me as this creepy guy hitting on them in the hardware aisle.
Wow.
And it's like, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. I've lost the intimacy of women's spaces, which anybody who knows what that is like understands how powerful that is. And while people listen to me better at meetings and when I'm in the pulpit and other stuff, as far as camaraderie and connection on a deep emotional level, other guys just are not equipped. They don't know how.
Let's pull that thread, because DC, that is so connects to everything we're talking about in terms of how white supremacy culture and violent extractive capitalism has also taken away the humanity of men. Because what you're naming is men do not have, there aren't right now, primarily in the United States, but I'm going to guess because I mean different parts of the world as well, but really this is most, I think, explicit in the United States of how few options there are for men to connect on an interrelational on a relational level, because then they get violent when they're rejected, and I put that in quotes. Women, people have agency, everyone's allowed to say no. So when the perception is that no, you know, click something in them because they haven't been in a loving, connected relationship of any kind, platonic or not, then that turns into rage, and then they start shooting things up. Wow.
Go ahead.
My kid's dad is sober. He doesn't drink. And when we moved to Arizona, he was talking about how hard it is to make friends as a man. And especially as a sober man who doesn't
Right.
sports.
Wow.
Like all the opportunities for men to connect are like at a bar having beers or watching a sports game. And he's not into sports and he doesn't drink. And I was like, well, can't you just like, you know, I have a lot of friends with, you know, male partners. Can't you just ask if they want to go out and have a coffee or something? And he's like, I can't ask them to go have a coffee. And I'm like, really? Like, that's so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and not, I don't know what maybe I am Pollyanna today where everything is, the answer is church, but like, I do love to see, sometimes we have in our congregations, like, I know my friend Reverend Anthony Johnson does a small group in Sedona called Future Masculine. And it's a small group for men trying to dismantle patriarchy. And so they talk about what their role is in that, but they have really intimate conversations and get to know each other in kind of a small group format in a way where they can be vulnerable and honest and develop intimacy with other men. And I think it's so beautiful because what a sad thing. You know, you see the statistics of, I was reading a study the other day that said women tend to score that they are better off after divorce, and men tend to self-report that they're doing a lot worse emotionally, and that a lot of that is about female friendships and how supportive female friendships can be and how much harder it is for men to have that in their life. And that makes me feel so sad. You know, I'm all about dismantle patriarchy, but also like patriarchy is hurting men too.
Yes.
It really is for them to not be able to have this accepted level. And I mean, I know a lot of men that have intimate relationships and friendships in their lives, and that's wonderful. But it's really sad to me that as a society, we make it so difficult for that to happen.
Yeah. And, I saw it was a video. I had no idea it was a TikTok or what. It came through my Facebook feed about a guy talking about what it was to be Gen X. And he said Gen X men were taught two things. Like, you are allowed to have feelings, and like anger was one, and I think I don't even remember what the other one was. Like, you're not allowed to feel anything but anger and
angst, maybe. Gen X guys are pretty
sad and grief. But even grief you're not allowed to feel because that turns into anger because you're not allowed to express vulnerability. Yeah. So in the course of my ministerial formation, I attended a bunch of workshops put on by an organization called the Human Awareness Institute, and it is a series of super intense workshops around sex and love and relationships and intimacy, and it, from the outside, it looks like very much like something that was founded in the 70s in Northern California, and it was founded in the 70s in Northern California, and it's a bunch of naked people in the woods hugging and talking about their feelings, which is good as long as the weather's okay.
And everyone's consenting.
And right. But they do. That's the thing. They talk about consent, and they talk about intimacy, separating intimacy from sex. Like how to be intimate without a sexual component to it.
Yeah.
And Monique Darling and Reed Mahelko have both done a lot with cuddle parties, which are sort of the same thing, where it's allowing for physical touch and physical closeness where everybody keeps their clothes on. Right? Men are touch starved.
Yes.
Men are touch starved. You know where I get hugs? From the ladies at church. Right? Guys don't do that. Or if they do, it's this sort of like chest bump thing, half hug thing. And during the pandemic, it was awful.
Yeah.
I realized that I had gone like 9 months where the only physical touch I had with another person was when the woman at the grocery store handed me my change. Okay? Right? Yeah, that's not good for people.
No.
It's not good. Like babies that don't have touch fail.
That's
right?
Right.
And so what happens when we raise little boys and then allow society to tell them that you're not allowed to hug anymore, or that's not cool, or that's not right? So look at what we've done to men.
Yeah.
Like we've completely emotionally kneecapped them somewhere in junior high. Right?
Well, and I think
so it's not unusual then that you've got a bunch of people who are wandering around touch starved, uncomfortable, and with limited options for expressing emotion. And the one that is allowed or even encouraged is violence.
Yes.
And suicide rates among older men are alarming.
Yeah, and they're getting worse.
Because they're, especially as the boomers age, because they're facing increasing vulnerability, increasing levels of dependence on others in a culture that doesn't allow them to be interdependent.
That's right.
So along with the Human Awareness Institute that has those amazing workshops, there's also a guy named David J., who lives in San Francisco and is a leader in the asexuality movement. And he's been doing some amazing stuff with intimacy work without sexual connection. And I almost want to say that there needs to be a particular segment of OWL that talks about intimacy separate from sexuality.
Yeah.
Maybe even a whole different curriculum on emotional intimacy and being vulnerable. Because honestly, if we create those boys, we will change the world.
Well, and the Teen OWL curriculum does talk about that. I've only taught the teen section, so I can't say about all of them. The high school OWL curriculum does talk about intimacy as separate from sex and all different types of touch and relationships. One thing that I see is that our kids, our UU kids, our progressive kids in Gen Z seem a lot different, right? Like gender looks very, very different.
That's true.
Right? That's so awesome.
But in progressive circles, right? But then you also have, like Aisha kind of alluded to earlier, and you were talking about DC, you know, boys raised with kind of the same conservative values that then end up thinking that like it's a friend zone thing, right? Like they think, you know, if a woman is offering you emotional intimacy and friendship, but not sex, that, you know, you are also owed that is
Entitlement.
Go together.
They're raised with a sense of entitlement to women's bodies.
Yes. And so then you have the whole, you know, incel, right, involuntary celibate kind of thing that happens where you have young men committing violence because
you're involuntarily celibate because you're an asshole.
Yes. And then they end up, you know, committing violence.
He goes, yes. Sorry.
Yes. Nobody wants to fuck you because you're an asshole. Right? Like that's what, like, yes, this makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
And you're not entitled to that shit. Oh my God.
I was getting to know someone last summer, and, you know, very early, just kind of having coffee, talking. And they told me a story about a crush they had on their coworker at work. And they were both going through a divorce, and they developed this like really deep, intimate friendship. And he fell in love with her. And then when he told her, she was not interested in a romantic relationship. She just really valued their friendship. And he said something pretty disparaging about her. And I was like, red flags, we're done. Because
thank you for your interest. I'm going in another direction now.
I was like, well, tell me what, you know, he said something about like she did the thing that women always do and friend zoned me.
Oh, fuck no. Yeah, no.
Like, well, it's that, like, I was like, well, it sounds like you had a really deep friendship and connection, and she liked that and wanted to continue that, but wasn't interested in a romantic relationship. Like, in what way did you feel? I mean, rejection sucks. I get it. But like, he said he felt like used and taken advantage of. And I was like, well, this is messed up. Like
being generous of spirit, I think that is part of what we were alluding to about men not trying. I'm trying.
Right?
That they haven't learned. There are a few places in our society there for in the United States for men to I don't know, learn resources or understand like that's an option. It's almost like it's not an option to have an emotionally intimate connection with someone who would be sexually attracted to, but so there is something in the zeitgeist of how, but I agree, Gen Z I do think is different. I do have 2 children, and my son has female friends that he is not romantically involved with, and it's much more commonplace. And my daughter has male friends and who she is not, although their stories are different, because she will say this person, you know, has a crush on me, is annoyed that I only want to be friends. And I'm like, you don't need that person in your life, only because I do worry about her safety. I mean, she's an, you know, young adult, and you don't know what's going on. And even though they're younger, but so she seems to be, thankfully for her, clear about her boundaries. Like, I just want to be friends, period, full stop. And for the most part, it seems to be okay. But I guess to what your story about this man, I wonder if part of his socialization, if all of his socialization is, that's not an option. This is an escalator that only goes one way. There is no other option. And because she didn't do this, there's something wrong with her.
Or with him. He's receiving that as a rejection of his validity as a person.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's all probably true, right? And like, I don't think he's a bad person. I just didn't want to be the one to teach him all of that. But
no. Listen.
I don't need a project. I'm good. Like, I got hobbies. I'm good.
But I mean, I'm in between, right? I'm a millennial. And so like, I have really close friends that are men. And we have what I would say is a really close, intimate friendship that's non-romantic. And like, it definitely takes a lot of communicating about.
Oh yeah.
Because the
Mhm.
assumption is always that it's, especially if people are single or available, right? That the assumption is that something's gonna be romantic. And also the assumption from outside observers is a lot of times that things are romantic unless it's corrected. And so, but I definitely know it's possible, but I love to see, I love Gen Z to see that they're making these relationships even more normalized and possible, and
Oh my God.
are
Thank
breaking
God.
out of the boundaries of like defining, you know, intimacy is only something that can happen in the context of a romantic relationship.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's to bring it back to congregations. One of the brick and mortar congregations I served had a very active men's group, and it was really quite wonderful. And I think if more of our congregations, I don't know how commonplace that is. I mean, and there was a women's group, and it is gendered, so it is the women's group did, I believe, I'm almost positive, were inclusive of non-binary and trans folks. So is that point wasn't made for men's groups, which was interesting. The men's group didn't make, I don't know, but maybe I didn't ask anyway. But I think in UU spaces, the more we could take opportunities to create containers of connection outside of Sunday morning. I met a couple recently who are new to Seattle, who are Gen Xers and have young adults. I'm like, yeah, we used to go to the UU church, but we wanted our Sunday mornings. Which, who can blame anybody? They're like, we want it. And I mean, if having kind of imaginative ways that folks can get together during the week, it's not to say not to do Sunday morning, but I think we need to think more than just Sunday morning and just create opportunities for connection and space. So
right. There was a curriculum. God, and I don't even want to think about how many years ago. I think it was put up by, I'm going to get the name wrong, Karen Bellevance Grace, I think, who was a something or other fellow, something or other, something. But it was called a 7-day church. And it was sort of a like, how do you be a UU every day? Like, what is it that you do that centers you as a Unitarian Universalist every day, as kids, as adults, as a multi-generational family, right? How do you do that? Do you, if you're a family that sits down to supper, do you light a chalice? Like, that's a good time to do that.
Right.
Right? How do you ritualize that stuff? How do you do the things you do, but also mark them as, I do this because I'm a Unitarian Universalism.
Yes.
I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and this is what I believe. And Ren, thank you. Yeah, like, and I heard about that, I want to say in 2013 or 14 or something like that.
Yep.
So the fact that I recalled it at all is sort of amazing. But yeah, so like that seems like something we could do, and I'd love to, and I don't know what happened to it. I don't know. I think it was a product of that period when Ren was a something or other fellow. I think it was Sophia Faz fellow. Is that what that was? But that was a product of that. Yeah. And I don't remember. It may have been a PhD product. It may have. I don't know. But geez, I'd like to see us do something like that.
I love the idea of having a show, especially dedicated to that too. Like, how do you bring your UU values 7 days a week? What do your UU values look like in your daily life? My 11-year-old is in OWL right now. She's in 5th grade. She's in 5th and 6th grade OWL. And at the parent orientation, they were asking us like how we talk about sex and sexuality and gender and our values at home. And I don't know why I opened my mouth. Sometimes I just say things and then I'm like, why did you say that, Janine?
I know why, Janine, because you're awesome.
No, I don't know. Apparently, I thought it was a good idea to volunteer that Vivian, my daughter, and I watched The Bachelorette. And we kind of, she says we hate watch it, and it's true.
Okay,
but
all right.
We watch it, and we also like talk about how messed up all the relationships are.
Yes.
And it's honestly like a really great time with my tween, because she's like, oh, did you see him just like grab her and hug her? He didn't even ask first. And like, she really, you know, we talk about consent, and we talk about like what you're looking for in a relationship. And the examples on The Bachelorette are not examples of relationships that we think are necessarily healthy or have values that match ours. But it doesn't have to be a good example to spark a conversation. Sometimes a bad example sparks an even better conversation.
Yeah.
It's like train wreck porn, right?
Yeah.
Like natural disaster porn, you know, like you watch pictures, you watch videos of like landslides on mountains and things like that. It's the same kind of thing. It's like wow, glad I'm not there.
To do, yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, we'll talk about like, oh wow, they're really shaming her about dating multiple people at once, but they're dating multiple people at once. Like, do you think that's a fair distinction between, you know, who's allowed to do what? And so there's my parenting tip for the week. Go watch The Bachelorette with your tween child. Don't do that. I don't necessarily recommend.
Well, no, here's the thing about that. Chances are very high your child's going to be watching it anyway. Isn't it better to have a conversation to counteract what they're seeing? I mean, I'm so not into. I grew up. I had Christian friends who were like, I had one friend I will never forget. Her parents wouldn't let her watch Three's Company, and I'm like, now I had a different kind of oppressive childhood, but my mother, because her English was limited, I mean, it's better now, obviously, but as an immigrant family, she, for the most part, unless it was soft porn or rated R, we could watch whatever we wanted on TV. And so I didn't quite understand. So then she just watched it at my house. I mean, it wasn't like, I'm like, well, let's watch Three's Company. Like, yeah, you know, Three's Company of all things, right? But I think this banning thing doesn't prevent it. It makes it more, but I think what you're naming is actually how now your tween knows that she could talk to you about, and right, and you're kind of, now that my children are young adults, for as much as they hated when I talked about sex openly and said vagina and penis, and they were like, la 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 la, mom, stop it. Now that they're young adults, those investments, they say things to me that had I not done that, they never ever would have. And so I just wanted to, like, I tell parents, like when I used to do parent orientation, I said, trust me, you are planting seeds, even if they pretend they don't want to listen, you are letting them know that they can come to you. And I promise you right now, I'm like, whew, wow. Some things I'm like, okay, all right. I all the time, like, wow, what things are my kids going to talk about in therapy? But then I think then we'll talk to me about something, and then I'll go, okay, all right, this I didn't do too badly with that. So that's really, I mean, I think, Janine, that's awesome. I think you're letting your children know they can talk to you. And you know, I watch Love is Blind. What kind of absurd show is that? And I'm into it. I'm like, this is burgers and bananas and past popcorn. I'm like, wow, this is like, you know what it speaks to? I will tell you, it speaks to I do watch it as both a social worker and a faith leader, the deep need for connection, the deep need for attention, and the conflation of attention with connection, which we know is not real, right? And so it is a fascinating show. I mean, it is entertaining on its surface, and it is, I'm not gonna lie. And it's also like, sometimes when I see when they're, you know, when somebody gets rejected or they're not chosen, the pain is real. Porn. It's what?
It's train wreck porn.
Well,
it's emotional relationship train wreck porn. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not wrong. We can do a whole show, I bet, about religious professionals that watch absolute garbage television.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not. People are consenting to come on these shows, and I, for me, Love is Blind is the other one. There was another one that was The Ultimatum. That was another. It was. I couldn't. Anyway, all right. Those are the two I watch. I don't watch The Bachelorette anymore, or The Bachelor I did when it first started, but now I've moved on to other complex relational train wrecks.
Oh, this is funny. I'm feeling amused and a little bit smug at this moment.
Take it down a notch, DC.
Listen, I spend my whole day trying to make the world a better place. I'm allowed my 1 hour of turning the brain off at the end of the night.
Same
right, no. Right, and my guilty pleasure is UFC.
Oh, see, that's a soap opera just in
That's a train wreck porn. Literally. Yeah. People are trying to ban each other, DC.
I know. And they're wearing, it's like one of the most homoerotic things on TV. It's absolutely, and it's hysterical.
They are trying to do it for physical
yes.
touch too? Do you think that's what that's
absolutely.
About?
Absolutely.
My son now, like I said, a young adult, when he was in high school, he wrestled, and his father had signed him up for a gym to do like extra. And so because of his physique, he's tall and thin, they wanted him to do UFC. And I said, you tell them that I'm from Jersey and not Seattle. Now I will go down there and beat them up myself. You are not doing that. This is when he was still a minor. I was like, that's not a thing. No, you could go there to do wrestling. You are not allowed to do ultimate fucking fighting. No. He's like, oh, Mom, I said, no, Mom, nothing. I said, I literally, this was my mantra after we moved to Seattle. People would say stupid shit to my kids. I go, you tell them your mother's not from Seattle. I'm from Jersey, and I will bring it. So none of the passive aggressive. I'm not conflict avoidant. No. Mm-mm.
No. But like totally, like that's part of why sports is so important.
Yes.
And you'll see Elizabeth Mount talks about this. Tweens and early teenagers, when they move through the hallway at school, they're like slamming into each other, and they're trying to get contact.
Right.
They're trying to get touch in the only way that is socially acceptable to them, in the only way they can emotionally handle.
Yeah.
Because they've been taught that all touch is sexual.
This is a whole this was a great show. We need to wrap up. This is a whole other topic. We should, maybe we'll think about getting a guest on to talk more about this. And especially, and yes, it's gendered, but there is something about how the male identified folks are socialized in this country, and it's the ramifications we're all living with in this violence, right?
And I got to tell you, as somebody who started testosterone a few years ago, chemistry is real. And what it has done to my brain and how I think and how I process emotions, I think I have cried maybe 3 times in the last 4 years.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah. Just don't anymore. One of those was when Quinn died. Right?
I cried like 4 times yesterday.
Right. I used to. That's what I used to do. I used to do it all the time.
No lie,
but now it just doesn't.
Wow.
So chemistry is real. Yes, we talk about socialization, but I gotta tell you, there's a reason that shit's a controlled substance.
Wow. Well, thank you for leaving us with that. And yes, and this was a great show. Thank you both.
This was a great show.
Great show. When I get up, we're on the show. If it was me and Tanner, me, DC, and Janine and Tanner, I love it. Thank you all so much. Thank the both of you. Yes. And we will see you next week for another deep dive into humanity and existential issues. Ciao, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.